a chaplain program last year because of the bad things that he was witnessing with drone killing and everything else. And Larry Wilkerson is a retired colonel. I'll just say he's in our Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Sanity group, where we have a few retirees who have seen this, the abuses and the problems. And he's a real outspoken. If you were at Hamlin, oh my gosh, there'll be a video of him, but he's real outspoken about the problems that we're facing right now. So Mnar Muhawesh, who runs the MintPress news, and if you have not seen this alternative media, it's a great source for good information. Larry Wilkerson's already on that in a couple of places in different interviews. And she sent out the op-ed for Chris Antal wrote earlier today, or yesterday. So Mnar is going to moderate a discussion. If you have questions, just try to remember them, and then we'll take some questions from the audience. But go ahead, Mnar.
Thank you so much, and I just want to thank everybody for being here today. I hope everybody can hear me. So I know we just have about an hour, so I'll get straight to the point. My name is Mnar Muhawesh. I'm the editor-in-chief of MintPress. We're an independent online news site based right here in Minneapolis, and we cover the state of the U.S. empire, civil liberties, war, and how special interests influence policies at home and abroad. So thank you, everybody, for being here with us today. I'd like to start by asking Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson the first question, which is, how do you explain the purpose of today's U.S. foreign policy versus U.S. foreign policy pre-World War II in shaping U.S. empire?
Good question. I'm going to take a moment just to say that if you didn't see the ceremony, that's what it was, the ritual that we had earlier, you missed something. I'm an advisor to military veterans on the campus of the College of Mnar A, the oldest public university in America. And I can't think of anything we've done for the veterans on our campus through all the bureaucratic, federal law, VA programs, you name it, that probably was as moving and ultimately as beneficial as what we did up here. I don't care if you could take it from the Sioux, you could take it from the Cherokee, you could take it from the Nez Perce, you could take it from any of the people we ethnically cleansed from 1866 to 1890, and you would probably get a better appreciation of what it means to be a warrior for the community and to welcome that warrior wounded mentally or physically back than what we saw there. And frankly, I wish we did more of those kinds of things in this country. I wish we did more of those ritualistic, call it what you will, things that show that the community and the military are part of one another. Now, to get to the question from that is a little difficult, but I'm going to try to by saying that one of the things we're doing today in that foreign policy is we're using the military instrument as its lead element. And we've been doing that since the end of the Cold War. Some would argue that we tried to do it during the Cold War, but we had a restraint, and it was called the Soviet Union. It had 30,000 missiles and other accoutrements that were nuclear that inhibited us. And so when that came off, we became the global policeman for whatever troubled the world, and we determined what troubled it. The military instrument is now the first instrument of choice. I mentioned this afternoon. I was in the White House in November of 2015 with the President and the Secretary of State, and the President was supposed to spend 4 or 5 minutes with us. He wound up spending over an hour with us, and the first words out of the President's mouth were, "There is a bias in this town towards war." I almost fell off my seat. I didn't think I'd ever hear a commander-in-chief, an American president, say that. So to answer your question, U.S. foreign policy prior to World War II was a mixed bag, but it wasn't dominated by war. U.S. foreign policy since World War II has been increasingly dominated by war and all the accoutrements thereof, and since the end of the Cold War, war has become the raison d'etre, the reason for existence of this republic.
Wow. And you make a very good point in that war is what is keeping the U.S. economy alive, I guess you could say. Today, we have Cold War rhetoric being bandied every single day on the media. It's being shoved down our throats that we must go to war with Russia. And so, just to follow up on your question, or on your answer, I'd like you to follow up with more on who is behind this rhetoric to drive us in a new Cold War with Russia, and why?
The same people are behind this effort, I think, in large part, though there are specific individuals who have different biases in this. Others would like to go to Syria first, and then Iran, and then Russia. Others would like to go to Taiwan first and provoke China, or the South China Sea and provoke China, whatever. But the general thrust, I think, with regard to Russia is the prospect of a new Cold War. That's even the language I'm hearing in Washington today. That's what the pundits and the think tanks, all of whom are in complicity with this new military-industrial think tank, university, scientific establishment, congressional complex. Eisenhower never dreamed in '61 when he talked about it that it would become so encompassing in this country. So much so that you have people now talking about the militarization of America. They're absolutely right. Whether you look at our law enforcement agencies accepting $5 billion worth of military equipment, or whether you look at just the general tenor of the land under the Patriot Act and so forth, we might as well call ourselves Sparta. And we might as well tell our soldiers, come home on your shield or with it. I mean, that's essentially what we are today. We are the world's policemen, but we're that policeman at our own volition. And Russia offers right now the greatest prospect for reviving a condition that will allow this complex to flourish and to flourish greatly. That's the reason.
Thank you. And I'd like to direct this question to you, Reverend Chris Antal. What do you think the prospects of world war are under a Trump presidency? Is he really just going to hit that button?
I didn't vote for Trump. And I need to stay in my lane. I'm a minister who has only been inside of the Beltway on field trips. So I know the limits of my experience, and I'm sitting next to a national security expert, and I'm humbled by that. So I want to just lay that context. I'm not ready to leave the country.
Okay.
I have 5 children, and I feel responsible to protect them. But I don't know. I mean, I don't. The man appears to be very unstable.
I think many of us would have to agree.
Yeah. So it's a real fear that I have.
Considering, under a Trump presidency, as Lawrence Wilkerson, laid out, there is an establishment working in the background that no matter who's president, that establishment is going to continue no matter what. And today we have a 6,000-page torture report that cost over $40 million to produce. That was conducted by Feinstein herself. That took over 5 years for her and her committee to create. Yet the majority of the public has no access to this torture report. I believe the CIA and most of the FBI also don't have access to this torture report. What happened to that report, and do you think the public will ever get to know more about torture?
I don't know what happened to the report. I'm not sure if you have any insight on that.
I'm not sure exactly what the status is right now. As I understand it, there are 6 copies left, and her, who is the chairman of the committee in the Congress and a Republican, and whom I went to North Carolina several times to try and defeat, but was unsuccessful, is intent on calling those copies back and destroying them. My political party wants to destroy every evidence of its complicity, and for that matter, some Democrats' complicity in torture. And that's contained in this report. Not just blaming the CIA and others, but the complicity of the two intelligence committees, the House Committee and the Senate Committee, who have for all practical purposes, not been doing their oversight role, but become cheerleaders for the CIA and for other intelligence entities. They're not what they were conceived to be, which was to be rigorous oversight of the intelligence community. Once Frank Church from Idaho, and I think the other committee chairman was Pike from the House, determined in the 70s that killing people for the state, assassinating world leaders and things like that was not what America should be doing. And we then put these oversight committees in place. They've now morphed into being cheerleaders for the intelligence community. And as you can imagine, 9/11 and the tragedies that occurred on that day gave them an extra boost in that regard. So we actually have a committee chairman now who's trying to destroy that report. Do away with it. And he'll probably succeed.
And I believe only, was it 500 pages that were released to the public?
About 600 pages in the so-called executive summary, which is enough to turn your stomach. But there's thousands of pages in the actual report. And I know the political situation in Washington, I think, fairly well. I've been immersed in it for 40 years. There's some hyperbole in it, probably. It was basically a Democratic group that functioned to do this report more than it was the Republicans. They tried to block them all the way. But I've seen the essence of the report, and I was also there when some of this stuff was happening. I think the report's fairly accurate. And that's the reason the agency in particular, and the Republicans in general, don't want it to come out, because it is damning.
Thank you. And Reverend Chris Antal, I know that you have a very interesting story to share with us today. How did your work through faith help you turn into an anti-war activist?
I think I can answer that one. So I don't have the kind of career that Colonel Wilkerson has in the military. I went in to the ministry first, and some of you who were around Hamlin this morning heard me say that I never registered for selective service. I went to Walden Pond on a high school field trip and read Henry David Thoreau and got inspired. I thought, that sounds pretty reasonable to me, so I thought my first act of civil disobedience would be to refuse to register for selective service. So I went on that path, and that was my first career in the ministry. I was in seminary at the time of September 11th. And at that time thought I was a pacifist, but I eventually felt a call, and that call came through several conditions that I became aware of. One was the torture at Abu Ghraib, and the question of where was the chaplain at Abu Ghraib, who was being the moral guide to our service members. The other condition was I would say the preponderance of evangelical chaplains that were occupying the ranks of the military chaplaincy, as well as a lot of the ranks of the officer corps, and the fact that we were deploying a largely Christian army into Muslim countries terrified me. As a Unitarian who brings a deep heritage of religious freedom and commitment to that, to the ministry and to my understanding of citizenship, I wanted to bring that perspective into the chaplaincy. So I was a volunteer to serve as a military chaplain, and I was in for 5 years, only about 2 years on active duty. That's the context. And it was facing the human cost of our wars, both the death of young soldiers as I had to preside over the dignified transfer ceremonies and take part in the notifications. I was on those teams that would knock in the middle of the night and inform. I remember one mother in Long Island, we had to tell her son had killed himself. So facing that human cost, but also witnessing the tragic waste of our military in terms of what was going on that I witnessed in Afghanistan, and the suffering that we, from my experience, what I witnessed and what I learned about the suffering we were causing to the local people. All of these things led me to give the sermon that I gave, that you heard, most of you heard this evening, and set me on a path where I'm not a pacifist, and I'm not sure about the anti-war thing. I'm not anti-military, but where I have come to stand is to resist militarism as distinct from the military, and that's an important conversation I think that needs to be had. But I support having a Department of Defense, but I don't support a Department of aggressive, preemptive, permanent war, which I think is the more accurate description of what we have currently.
Thank you. And you bring up a very good point about how our military veterans are being treated, and also the victims of our war who are victimized or dehumanized, in our media every single day. Right now we have a very dangerous level of Islamophobia that has swept across this nation. Very simply, just so that we can justify our endless war machine in the Middle East and war policies. In your op-ed, Lawrence Wilkerson, you wrote for Armistice Day, "Truth about war more often emanates from the warrior than the non-warrior." What did you mean by that?
No one knows the damnation of war better than a soldier or a Marine. Airmen, sailors, but soldiers and Marines in particular, because they're the ones who have to, as we say in the profession, close with the enemy and kill him at close range. That means with a bayonet or a rifle, or at most a 100-yard shot, a 50-yard shot, whatever. Sometimes hand-to-hand combat, like's going on in Mosul right now, or in Raqqa right now, where you're having to go from house to house, village to village, all over Nineveh province, and you're having to root out ISIS, and you're having to kill them or capture them. In most cases, you probably have to kill them because they don't want to be captured. Those people know the price of war better than anybody on the face of the earth. So if you want to know about war, and for that matter, you want to know about, as the Reverend just said, militarism, and I agree with him 100%. I'm not against warriors. I was one. I'm against the militaristic attitude that develops around their use for unnecessary reasons. And so are they. And if you will talk to them, and you will really get their view, you'll find out that they're opposed. They're extremely opposed to these wars of choice, which are the choice of what I just said before. The people who have an interest in bombs, bullets, and bayonets. And that interest is usually filthy lucre. And that's a big motivation behind what we're doing today. That plus the fact that we don't seem to be able, as the President suggested that day in the Roosevelt Room, to disabuse ourselves of this attitude that we have to fix every problem in the world the moment that it arises, and the fix is to kill somebody or to threaten to kill somebody. The two candidates that we just had offered to us in this election, both of them made comments, and one of them had a profession that dictated this, in my view, that they were going to continue to play by that playbook. Now, one wonders what one of them is going to do, because he's bounced around all over the place. Is he going to rewrite the playbook? Is he going to play by the playbook? Is he going to throw it out the door? What's going to happen? That uncertainty certainly unnerved the markets initially. They recovered today and have continued to recover as long as he remains somewhat conciliatory and doesn't look like he's going to throw the playbook out. But just imagine if he suddenly decided that he would, and it might be beneficial to the country that he did. Then you see what I'm talking about, because then the markets will go all over the place again, because the markets are part of this state. They're part of waging war. They're part of the warfare state. Our entire financial system now is geared to this warfare state. It has an umbilical extending from it. That's how it survives. That's how it makes a lot of its profits, directly or indirectly. Not for nothing was HSBC found out for laundering drugs. You know where a lot of those drugs were coming from? Afghanistan. This is a vicious, many-headed animal that we've allowed to grow up in this country, as Eisenhower predicted. And if we're not careful, it is going to eat all our lunches before it's through with us.
And Reverend Antal, I want to talk a little bit about uniting the faith movements. We are seeing the rise of many evangelical churches who are standing up in support of war and Islamophobia and mass deportations and endless war, torture, drone bombings, and even supporting apartheid in Israel. So how do we get the establishment out of our churches and faith organizations, including mosques, including synagogues, and so forth?
Well, I recognize that the faith community is divided on this, and even the evangelical community is not all as you describe. Jim Wallace, who founded Sojourners, it counts himself among evangelicals, but he was part of a movement among evangelicals that put forth a very powerful statement of repudiation of American militarism about 6 or 8 years ago. So there's no way to describe the faith community with one sweep, or even evangelicals. Even though I do agree with Andrew Basovich, who says that the new American militarism that he writes about would not be possible without the support of the American evangelical community. I believe that to be true based upon what I've experienced within the chaplaincy and the military chaplaincy. I find hope in several initiatives that I'm involved with presently. There is an interfaith working group on drone warfare, for example, that is meeting monthly in Washington, D.C., and I have been the representative to that interfaith group from my denomination. That interfaith group includes mostly Christian groups, but there's also a Muslim representative in that group. And that group has, among other things, led a delegation to meet with the National Security Council, and I was part of that delegation in July to bring our concerns about the U.S. targeted killing program as religious leaders. And this working group is now crafting a letter of concern for the incoming President-elect Donald Trump on the drone program. And it has already been signed by more than 20 leaders of denominations, actually, United States denominations, including Jewish and Muslim faith communities. My own denomination is a sign-on to that letter, and this is being led in part through Peace Action in Princeton, New Jersey, which received a grant. Part of this is also to develop a curriculum for over 200 faith communities in America on drone killing, to generate serious discussion in America's faith communities about what we're doing and also to mobilize people towards social action on this issue. So I'm part of some interfaith initiatives there. I'm also part of some initiatives around nuclear proliferation, and there is a growing movement of Catholics and Christians and my tradition Unitarians who are engaging the administration around the upgrading of the nuclear arsenal. So I have hope, because I think these things are happening. I don't think there's enough happening, but these things give me hope, and that's where I'm focusing my energy.
And absolutely, I think events like these especially, thank you for those, to the Unitarian Church for hosting this event tonight. We do have an establishment religious oligarchy, we'd like to call it, that does influence politics a lot, not just here in the United States, but we have countries like Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Turkey, and even apartheid Israel, who are pouring millions, and if not billions of dollars into our political system to influence policies. Colonel Wilkerson, can you speak a little bit about how those actors have influenced U.S. foreign policy today in the Middle East when it comes to Syria, the crisis in Yemen? I mean, talk to me about this.
Syria is a particular egregious example of the complex working in ways that are ultimately inimical to U.S. interests, national security interests, even ultimately, in the long term, perhaps even existentially. What we're talking about in Syria is essentially a couple 100,000 Syrian farmers who had no water for 2 years in a row. Think about climate change, think about where it's going to hit worse than first, this area, Western Asia. They started a relatively peaceful protest about not having any water, as farmers would do anywhere, I think. The Saudis, the Qataris, and others, the Turks, decided this was a wonderful opportunity to get rid of someone they detested, Bashar al-Assad, the president of Syria. The CIA in the United States, already in the area and already functioning in this regard to a certain extent, decided, well, we better go along with this. And so we began funneling arms, as did the Saudis, the Qataris, and others, to the various elements that the Saudis and the Qataris essentially began sending into Syria. Before we knew it, we were funding and arming a thing called Daesh, ISIS, which really raised itself up out of Abu Musab al-Zarqawi's group, Al-Qaeda in Iraq, which we also created. How did we create it? Very simply. There was no Al-Qaeda in Iraq until we invaded. Saddam Hussein would never have allowed them there. He'd have cut their throats. He did, regularly. So when we came in and removed this rather authoritarian leader, I will admit to that, draconianly so, in many respects, the constraints came on. And here was a target-rich environment of U.S. soldiers to kill. Al-Qaeda didn't have to come to the United States. They could kill us in Iraq. And so this group grew up in Iraq. And it was allied with the Sunnis, who felt like we had deprived them of their majority rule in Iraq. And we defeated it. It cost us a lot of casualties, but along with the British and some others, we defeated them, basically. We defeated them to the extent that Sunnis then decided, well, maybe we've got a better future if we go along with this new country that the United States is trying to create. And then we left. The government we left in Baghdad then began killing, jailing, and doing whatever it could to disempower the Sunnis. Once again, guess where the Sunnis went? Back to the people that were left from Abu Musab al-Zarqawi, whom we killed. And they created a group, and they moved into Syria, and they called themselves, yes, you got it, Daesh. And they began to fight along with the Syrian government, or against the Syrian government, along with other elements, some of which are original Al-Qaeda under Ayman al-Zawahiri, leader of Al-Qaeda after bin Laden was killed. So now we have created the same thing we created with the Mujahideen in Afghanistan, a blowback that got us on 9/11. We've created this group in Syria that is now trying to overthrow Assad, drawn the Russians in because Syria happens to be their last foothold in that region, and they're not about to surrender it. Still have the Turks there because Erdogan, who is now a dictator in Turkey, don't tell me Turkey's a democratic republic. Turkey is a dictatorship, and Erdogan is the dictator. All you have to do is look at what he's done. He's taken over everything. Justice ministry, police, agriculture. He's taken over everything. He's a dictator right now. He's running Turkey, and he doesn't want to quit. And I could go on because there's so much complexity to Syria that is pitiful. But what you need to know about Syria is that we are not blameless. And now we refuse to recognize the fact that with Iranian help, Hezbollah help, and Russian help, Assad is going nowhere. So the first thing we've got to do in Syria is back up and quit reinforcing strategic failure. We've got to back up and say, okay, Assad, you can stay. That's the first thing we have to do. And when I say that in Washington, I get people looking at me and saying, oh, that brutal guy, he killed his people, he did all this kind of stuff. We don't even know that he used chemical weapons. That's how bad our intelligence was. And I'll tell you right now, what we're finding out as the Iraqis capture some of the ISIL fighters in Nineveh province is that they have chemical weapons. So you tell me who used chemical weapons in Syria. I'm not trying to defend Bashar al-Assad. What I'm saying is, if you want to stop more people from being killed, and we're up to, I think, somewhere around 200, 300,000 now, plus we've destabilized Jordan, we've destabilized Lebanon. I was in Syracuse recently. A member of the Jordanian royal family came up to me and said, I know who you work for. I know who you work for. You go back and tell that man that you work for that there is an Iraqi or a Syrian family or 2 or 3 in every single Jordanian home. Do you know how destabilizing that is? Well, the same thing's true in Lebanon. We're destabilizing the whole region. Now, bottom line to this, guess what? There are lots of American neoconservatives, many of them arrayed around both candidates, but now flocking over to Donald Trump because he won, who think this is good policy. They think it's good policy, first of all, because if Israel's enemies are in chaos, they can't concentrate on Israel. So you've got to keep the region in chaos. They'd like to get Iran into chaos, too. So they're going to probably try to get rid of the nuclear agreement with Iran. Second, they think the region will never reform itself. This includes everything from Islam to autocratic leaders, unless every current leader is removed and the forces that result are allowed to work themselves out. This is the neoconservative philosophy with regard to Western Asia. Now, there are other things connected with it, like pipelines and oil and gas and so forth, as there always are for the empire. But those are the philosophical, ideological underpinnings of what we are doing in Syria. And don't think we aren't doing it other places, too. Don't think, for example, we didn't have something to do with the revolution in Kiev. Don't think we didn't try to overthrow Hugo Chavez with the CIA in 2002 in Caracas. Don't think we're not trying to overthrow other leaders in the world. I tell my students when we study Chile and Guatemala and Iran and Lebanon and Africa all through the Cold War, I say, what do you think you're going to read about in 20 years? You think we stopped this? No. Ronald Reagan had 59 covert operations in 8 years. 59. You don't even know about 50 of them. We're still doing it, and we're doing it in your name and with your money.
Thank you. I think that that was a great overview of the current mess, I could say, the driving factors that are creating a mess in the Middle East. I know the Iraq War alone left over 2 million innocent people dead. I believe the war in Afghanistan also left about 2 million dead. And that number, of course, continues to rise. Now we have our proxies, as you mentioned, like ISIS and these other autocratic governments who are committing massive atrocities in the region. And, of course, on the surface, they say it's about religion and sectarianism, but we all know that it just comes down to hegemony and power and money. We have I want to, continue more into the faith movement, since we are here tonight at the Unitarian Church, and we have this opportunity to talk about unity within our faiths. We currently have a crisis of Islamophobia that I had mentioned before. And I'm wondering, Reverend Antal, how you have addressed this personally within your faith communities in talking about Muslims and talking about the Trump plan that we're about to enter very soon with the rise of Islamophobia. I know there was a viral video that went viral a couple days ago of Trump fans calling on the killing of Muslims as soon as Trump becomes president. And so I'm just wondering how you've addressed Islamophobia within your faith communities.
Sure. Well, the first is around the drone program. I mean, obviously, most of the people that we're killing with the drones are Muslim. They're people in Muslim countries, and our administration has so far only acknowledged publicly the non-Muslims that we've killed. And the compensation that has been paid has only been paid when we've accidentally killed the non-Muslims, which I find is horrendous. So in my congregation, I've been part of a movement that actually grew out of Veterans for Peace and Leah Bolger called the Drone Quilt Project. And you've used the word dehumanization a couple of times. One of the ways from the faith perspective we address the dehumanization is through humanizing. When the structures and powers of militarism dehumanize our victims and make them into anonymous militants, our response as people of faith who value the inherent worth and dignity of every person is to humanize those people, to give them names, and to lift up those names to the public. So the Drone Quilt Project, in the tradition of the AIDS quilts of the 80s, is a project that identifies the victims of U.S. drone strikes in quilts. So a quilt has maybe 24 panels, and each panel is a name of a verified victim of a U.S. drone strike. And there are now over a dozen of these quilts. So my congregation was active in constructing one of these quilts and then hosted the quilts in our sanctuary for several months. And I've been part of the movement to display these quilts in various venues to raise the consciousness of the public in this country and to humanize these people that we're killing with the drone program. And the numbers by probably the independent sources is anywhere from 4,000 to 8,000 people killed with the drone program. So that's one way to humanize. The other way that I'm involved in currently, I mentioned earlier, is in refugee resettlement. That I'm currently working with Church World Service, which is one of the 9 agencies that's contracted with the Department of Defense to resettle refugees coming into the United States. And recently was part of an interfaith forum in the city of Poughkeepsie where Church World Service is going to open their newest resettlement office. And once those offices are open, they begin resettling families within a 60-mile to 100-mile radius of those offices. And that's basically how these 85,000 refugees come in, as they came in last year. They come in through these 9 agencies that have about 355 offices around the country. So the faith community is very much involved in the resettlement of these people, and most of them that are coming now are Muslim. So in our community, it is an alliance of the synagogues. We have the Jewish community, we have the Muslim community in the Hudson Valley of New York, We have the Christian community and working in solidarity with some of the Catholic colleges and also the liberal arts colleges and our own Unitarian Universalist Association. So we are part of that work to address the concerns of the larger community about bringing in these refugees and speak up when people protest out of biases and fears to welcome these refugees into our communities. So in both of those ways, I'm involved with the faith community's resistance to the Islamophobia and the education and rehumanization of these people that are suffering from the human cost of our warfare.
Thank you, and I think that you embody the resistance that we're seeing across the board here among the faith community and among the anti-war movement. And under the Obama administration, we've seen an unprecedented war against whistleblowers. And this isn't just people like Edward Snowden or Julian Assange, I should say. Excuse me, I had a brain freeze. But the anti-war movement is also under attack. And that's why I think events like these are so important, and people like you both are so important, because you embody that courage that many of us are, when we're sitting at home, we wonder, what can we do? Well, it's very simple. We just need to speak out. We have so much power if only we, the citizens of this country, knew. And so, Lawrence Wilkerson, I would like to address this question to you. The state of empire, especially under the Obama administration, although he put that nice smile for us on TV, he did prosecute more whistleblowers than any other administration in U.S. history. We have WikiLeaks, which is an important asset within the journalism community that has exposed Hillary Clinton and her inner, circle for war crimes and corruption, and also exposing, war crimes under the Iraq War and the war in Afghanistan as well. And then we have whistleblowers like Edward Snowden, who is being threatened with assassination and imprisonment. Where do you see this war on whistleblowers going now that we will have a Trump presidency?
Two comments, one of them not related, one related. I got to pick up on where the Reverend left off. Am I right, Reverend?
Yeah.
Okay. Sometimes I don't know what the right term is. Angela Merkel has taken the equivalent, if it were us, of 4.5 million refugees. Think about that. We have taken a pittance from Afghanistan, from Iraq, and from Syria. A pittance. What's wrong with us? Not only are immigrants the soul of this country, they are also utterly essential to this country's staying fresh economically. That's one of the reasons Angela Merkel took these people, because many of these people are engineers and doctors and lawyers and so forth and so on. Germany needs this kind of labor. Have you looked at Germany's demographics lately? Like Japan, if they don't get fresh flow of people, they're going to disappear. So there's a enlightened self-interest associated with it, but I'm looking at it from a humanitarian point of view, and frankly, I'm ashamed of my country. I am ashamed of my country and what it's doing with regard to this incredible refugee crisis. Wait till you see what happens with climate change. And we have 200 million people coming out of the South and the Southwest, Western Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa, because they got no food and no water. And most of these people are going to be under 50, many of them under 20, and they're going to come with a Kalashnikov, and half of them, the police, are going to be male. You talk about a security problem that we're not doing very much about right now. That's what we're talking about.
You probably don't have to tell Trump about that.
Well, I have to put that in there because, we are usually a nation that welcomes immigrants, and we have suddenly turned off that welcome. And we've done this before in our history, but we've always recovered from it and done smarter things. I see the trend the other way now. So that's frightening to me because, as I said, it's the lifeblood of this country, and it's the lifeblood of the value system and the morality of this country, too. What do I see Trump doing with whistleblowers? I think from what I've heard him say, I can give you two answers. Either he's going to hang them from the White House lawn, or he's going to be more lenient. I don't know which, because frankly, Donald Trump has been all over the music sheet. I don't know what he believes on anything. National security, foreign policy, domestic policy. He said he wants to raise taxes here, he wants to lower taxes there, he wants to pay for a military that's falling apart because he can't find people. Donald Trump is going to get a wake-up call when he gets briefed. And he finds out that some of the things that he made campaign promises about are not just impossible, they're dangerous even if you try to do them. And so I hope that the institutional fabric of Washington corrals him a little bit. But on the whistleblower business, not only has President Obama taken this further than any president in our history, which was really disappointing to me because I campaigned for him and I voted for him, and I thought, here's a new guy. Stupid me, fooled again. He has taken it to the point of actually prosecuting people who are uncovering massive fraud, massive abuse of the system, massive expenditure of your taxpayer dollars for nothing other than their own profit after they walk through the revolving door and take a position with that industry that they funded while they were at the NSA or they were at the CIA or in the Pentagon or whatever. So going after people who might be revealing secrets, that's one thing. I think he's gone too far there too. But going after people who are revealing the dirty laundry of the bureaucracy, stealing your money, this is nonsense. This is counterproductive. This is dangerous. And yet that's what he's been doing. And Eric Holder is he's no different. He's just as guilty as anybody else at the Justice Department. This is not something we should be doing. You know, there are philosophers in the world who will tell you that you know a civilization by the state of its prisons. You know a civilization by the state of this or that. You know a civilization that's supposed to be democratic by the way it goes after whistleblowers. And we are not looking like a really sound republic right now, especially going after these people who are exposing fraud and abuse of unbelievable proportions.
We just have a few minutes left before we break up for questions from the audience. But I'd like to ask you both this question, and Lawrence Wilkerson, you can go first, and Reverend, you can go second. If we could describe the state of the empire today, it is mass surveillance, nuclear weapons, the proliferation of nuclear weapons, indefinite detention, endless war, torture, drone bombings. And as you just pointed out, there really is no accountability. How do we return from the dark side?
Well, you know, if you change the technological component of what you just said, you just described Rome. But you didn't describe Rome in the beginning. You didn't even describe Rome under Augustus. You described Rome around the time of Nero and beyond. And that's where the empire is right now. I sometimes look at my students and I say, you don't think we're an empire? And I then throw the map up of 900 military bases around the world, the places where we have forces actually on the ground and so forth. We're an empire. We may be a different, slightly different type of empire, but in history's eyes, we are an empire. Where is it engraved in stone? Show me, take me to the spot and show me that empires last. Every empire in human history has expired. Some expire violently. The Third Reich didn't last very long. For that matter, the Soviet Union didn't last very long, about 70 years, longer than the Third Reich. The Syrian Empire lasted a while. The Roman Empire lasted quite a while. It relocated to Constantinople and lasted a little bit longer. British Empire lasted for a while, but the sun now sets on it. And as Jeremy Greenstock said to me in London not too long ago, we're a middling power now. A middling power. Well, the question about the United States in my mind right now as an academic is, are we going to make it to being just a middling power, or are we going to go down big time? And when you think about how we might go down big time, think about, for example, and people have written books on this, and the books are really convincing. Think about the 8th largest economy in the world. Think about a very populous country called California. 8th largest economy in the world. I was stunned when I saw how much military spending we did in California when I joined Powell as chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. At that time, it was $90 billion. California adds hugely to the United States GDP. Alabama and Mississippi, for example, subtract from that GDP. They wouldn't even exist, economically speaking, if California and New York didn't transfer money to them every year. Think about California leaving. California just voted for Hillary Clinton. They didn't vote for Donald Trump. Think about California deciding it wants to be an independent state. Think about Texas. And believe me, I've heard this conversation in Texas. I've heard it in the Congress from Texas congressmen. Think about Texas leaving. We think that can't happen. Look at history. It happened throughout the last 5,000 years of human history. And it could very well happen here. What do we do when we start falling apart? Well, I would submit to you that this election has shown us that there is enormous potential for us falling apart. And maybe even falling apart fighting one another.
Yeah, your question is where can we find hope? Right?
How do we return to the dark side?
You have that part.
Yeah.
It's a big aspect.
Yeah, and I'm a Unitarian, so I can't really talk much about life after this world, because I don't know if there is any. And our focus is on building the beloved community in this one. So, as a minister, I find hope in community like this one, and the community that I served back in New York. And I've been encouraged by 2 books recently. One is a book by Ron Heifetz, who is a leadership guru out of Harvard. And the book is called Leadership Without Easy Answers. And he distinguishes technical problems from adaptive challenges. And all of those things you've just listed, I would say they're adaptive challenges in the sense that there's no quick fix solution. There's no quick fix solution to all of those things you've just listed. So rather, they're calling us into a new way of being as a people. That's what adaptive challenges do. And adaptive challenges call for adaptive leadership. And Heifetz says adaptive leadership, they're not the saviors who come in with the solutions to all these problems, but adaptive leaders are leaders who influence the community to face their real problems. And that's what I hear in the Colonel here, where he's challenging us to look at these real problems. That's what I try to do in my Veterans Day sermon, to face painful truths. So I think the hope comes when we can move beyond the self-deception and face these real problems, and out of that discover a new way of being together. So that was the first book that has given me hope, is thinking about these as adaptive challenges and trying to be an adaptive leader that can influence the community to face these real problems and not avoid them. And then the second book is by a Catholic Christian mystic, Henry Nouwen, who's dead now. It's called Peace Work, Prayer, Resistance, and Community. So I've taken this and studied this little book, and it's been a real source of encouragement and hope and guidance for me. The idea of resistance, that we who work for peace need to be a people of resistance, inspired by the likes of Daniel Berrigan, who can say no to the powers of death, but at the same time now it says resistance is also saying yes to life. So the way that this plays out to me is a very public and clear no to the targeted killing program, but also a yes to life, which plays out in the support of refugees and compassion for those who are on the margins and suffering. So for me, that's where I draw hope, is in the prayer, the resistance in the community that I serve and that I connect to. A community that has the strength to resist the powers of death, but also the community that can celebrate and say yes to the spirit of life.
Thank you. And I just want to end with a final comment that the reason we're talking about these issues today is because we're not following convergence. Let's just be honest here. This conversation is being live streamed today on our Facebook page on MintPress News, and we work in the independent media business, and so we know that these conversations, indefinite detention and mass deportations and mass killings and drone bombings, all of the things that we talked about today, these are things that are completely censored by our media, which is owned by 6 corporations. And so I appreciate hearing this from faith communities and also with people with military backgrounds. And so thank you everybody for being here tonight. And then we're going to take a break here so that we can get into questions. So we can actually get started with questions if anybody has any.
Comments?
Questions or comments?
Got one up there.
Do we have a mic for the audience, or?
No, you just have to be loud.
Okay, I will repeat it if I can hear you.
Okay,
I can move this mic down there. Why don't I move this? You can share.
We talked about the military-industrial complex, which, as Colonel Wilkerson explained, has a lot of different aspects to it now. It's a much richer complex. But this is a force that is acting behind whoever's president. We had a president-elect, Obama, the man of hope and change, who, as soon as he got into office, I realized, wait a second, he's keeping Secretary of Defense Gates on. He's keeping these other people on. He's appointing people from the banks. He's just continuing the same thing. So, and it has been mentioned tonight that there's this force of neocons that are going to be surrounding whoever was to be president. But I did feel a relief myself, although I didn't vote for Trump. I felt a relief that we weren't going to have Hillary, because I've read Ray McGovern and Robert Perry and some others who talked about how close we were to a nuclear war. Now, it looks like, for me, I felt emotionally a little bit better. But I really don't know about Trump, because he has said some really crazy things and abusive things. He is a bully. But I'm wondering if he's a strong enough independent person to not succumb to the pressures of the neocons so quickly as Obama did. And that's my question.
Thank you very much. Is that towards Lawrence Wilkerson?
Yes.
That's an excellent question. It's one that several of us in Washington right now are pondering. We don't know. I think you're going to see some indications as he picks his cabinet. For example, if John Bolton is in his cabinet, we have problems. I would say if Newt Gingrich is in his cabinet, we have problems. And there are other people we could all probably agree on that we have problems with. On the other hand, if he picks reasonably sane people, and I just heard today that he is probably going to pick a Goldman Sachs individual to be the treasurer. I thought to myself, my God, we're right back where we were.
Yep.
You know, This is crazy. This is absolutely crazy. We are letting Wall Street run our country in every financial respect available. It's just crazy. Ever since Bob Rubin. Bob Rubin was the most powerful man in Bill Clinton's 2 administrations, by far. He changed the whole fabric of the financialization of America. And he changed it badly for the real economy. That's the damage that he did. The real economy is suffering because 1% of America is so obscenely rich now that they have the GDP of Brazil.
Wow.
400 families possess the gross domestic product of Brazil. That's obscene. And Rubin set in motion the process of financialization that made that possible. And so if Trump's going to bring somebody in like that, where are we? We're in the same spot we were. But I'm going to be watching it. I think that's going to be the biggest indicator of who does he bring in. I'm frankly scared to death of Mike Pence. I know him too well. I'm scared to death of him. I'm scared of his affiliation with Bibi Netanyahu. Mike Pence would sell out this country to Israel tomorrow morning. That's a strong statement, but I believe it. There are other Americans I'd make that statement about too. I saw people in the Pentagon, in the White House, and elsewhere wittingly give Israel precedence over their own country.
And I think we already have one of Bibi Netanyahu's cabinet members who said that now that Trump is in office, he will say goodbye to a Palestinian state. So it's already happening. Any other questions? Yes.
Let me be among many who are so thankful for your willingness to tell us what we need to hear. Of course, our focus is on the military at this point, and as you said earlier today, we have a military that has in their blood the understanding that they take orders from civilian leadership, and there are ethics that are held very strongly. There seems to be a possibility of corruption, of using the military really to become more like organized crime. I look at the military in Honduras as pretty deeply entangled in organized crime there. And of course, there's relationships with U.S. covert operations as well. How can we reinforce those people in the military who, it's a dilemma. We've just talked about the whistleblowing aspect of things, but I fear that there's going to be more pressure for corruption in those conventional, traditional patterns of using force to get what you want, and funneling drugs, and funneling trafficked individuals, and then of course there's the corporate big money as well. I'm sorry, my question is isn't more articulate, but how can we have common cause with those people of good character in the military who also would be opposed to those influences?
And who do you direct this question to? I don't know if I have the answer to that. I work with a lot of people, like we interview people from Veterans for Peace who have come out and are very outspoken against these these actions. But I know that you both probably have more experience than I do to speak on that. So,
I guess the first I would like to hear if you also have some concern about what I see as mafia-type ties, which are much more than conventional mafia, if you will.
That makes more sense, yes.
21st century mafia.
My concern right now about the status of the military as an institution is not that it'll march down Pennsylvania Avenue or that even it will refuse an order from Donald Trump and cause a constitutional crisis. My concern is that it is becoming, as Andrew Basovich of Boston says a lot, and I'm working with Andy right now on an all-volunteer force forum, it's becoming alienated. It's becoming a separate entity within the body politic of the United States. That's very dangerous development. It doesn't feel a community anymore. It doesn't feel like it belongs anywhere. It feels like we're shopping and they're dying. That's the thing that concerns me most. I don't have concerns about the military becoming a mafia like certainly the Honduran one is. When I met with the Honduran military a few years ago, I wanted to go out and take a shower afterwards. Most disgusting bunch of people. The only other group I met with in the military that I felt that way about was the Nigerians when Sani Abacha was in charge of Nigeria. You wanted to go take a shower. These weren't military professionals. These were thugs in uniform, existing for one purpose, to rape the treasury of their country. That's not the United States military. It never has been and never will be. We've had some dark moments, but that's not the U.S. military. We should all be thankful for that. We do not have that kind of professional military. But the danger is that professional military is growing further and further away from the rest of America. And it's getting angry because it's doing that. One of the reasons Andrew joined us in this group that's trying to bring back some form of conscription, for example, is that very reason, to bring us back together again. To put the Harvard graduate with the high school graduate and make them talk to each other, make them socialize, at least to get some kind of community back into the armed forces.
In addressing her point about the drug trade, do you think that's more, in concern to the war in Afghanistan? Who helped perpetuate the drug trade, the opium out of Afghanistan? Do you think that's more, maybe not in a military status, but more maybe on an intelligence status?
I think the drug problem with Afghanistan is largely the same as it was with Vietnam. If you go back and look after Vietnam, we had a real problem with drugs flowing back in. Some of it was because soldiers brought the drugs back with them from Southeast Asia, and some of it now is because they bring drugs back from Afghanistan. On the highway from Washington up to New York, 95 principally, but ancillary roads too, we have seen an incredible increase in drug busts along that highway. Well, if you look at what's traversing that highway, it's largely soldiers and Marines that are getting caught with these drugs. But that's a minuscule amount, really. The big amount comes back with the people who are running the drug business globally. And it's not just Pablo Escobar or the Medellin cartel or whatever. It's HSBC, it's Wells Fargo, it's all the big banks that are laundering the money. It's UBS in Switzerland, the biggest bank in the world. They're laundering the money for these drug dealers, and they're doing it in secret accounts, usually, and they're doing it in ways that, here's a kicker for you. We had a whistleblower from UBS. He wrote a book called Lucifer's Banker. It'll be out very shortly. 12,000 secret accounts in UBS alone. We didn't prosecute but about 2,700 of them. You know why we didn't prosecute the others? Because they were giving to the Clinton Foundation. They were giving to George Soros and his boys. We don't want to prosecute those guys. And another reason is because we didn't know where all their filthy lucre came from, and we damn well knew some of it came from drugs. And from illicit arms sales and human trafficking, and you name your crime. So until we can do something, we're never going to eradicate it, of course, but until we can do something about that, which is much more a part of the support foundation for drugs than any military bringing drugs back or whatever, we're not going to make any headway. And I'll tell you right now, I didn't think I'd ever say this, but the first thing I'd do is legalize drugs. We have done with drugs what we did with alcohol. We created organized crime in the United States with prohibition. And what we've done now with drugs is given it a kick in the rear end, accelerated it, and made it as profitable as it could possibly be. And when you have people making billions of dollars off drugs, you can have all the wars you want. You're never going to stop it.
Thank you.
I just want to add that local people, who have come back, have talked about the moral betrayal of risking their lives and being away from their families in order to guard trucks full of drugs.
You
And
bet.
they knew that these were...
We had a fight in Afghanistan with the British over whether or not we were going to destroy poppies or leave poppies. Because some of our commanders felt like if you took the livelihood away from the farmer, and this is the person who really gets punished in this drug war, the Colombian peasant, the peasant in Afghanistan who's raising the poppy crop, because if he raises something else like apricots or whatever, he's not going to make nearly enough money to survive, so he raises the poppy. And we had this huge argument. And, if you're helping the warlords or you're not helping the warlords. And so we actually had an ISAF force in Afghanistan where one place was prosecuting the drugs, burning the poppies, and another place was just looking the other way. I mean, incredible. You either have a policy or you don't have a policy.
Thank you.
Colonel Wilkerson, I couldn't hear what you said. I can't remember what you said this morning about what we're fighting for. But I know damn well we're fighting for the profits of corporations. And there are plenty of corporations that make profit off war.
Well, Smedley Butler, the Marine general who testified before them, the Armed Committee on the Armed Forces, Smedley Butler said Al Capone operated in maybe a couple of counties, maybe a state. I operated on 2 continents. I was a criminal for the United States capitalist system. This is a Marine general. He had participated in 35 interventions in Latin America and during the Boxer Rebellion in China. He was a criminal for organized capitalism. That's what he said he was.
I think we feel like this is a slightly strange question, but I'm sitting there thinking of trying to write letters to Pence or Trump, and I don't even know what rhetoric to use or how it would be manipulated. I feel like, what kind of language do I use? I write letters for Amnesty International, to the governments of Saudi Arabia and all this, and I am going, what could I say to Trump or Pence or that would, these people with this kind of mentality? How do I talk to them? What do we just say? I'm repeating myself because I'm confused.
So what do we say to politicians to get them to change? Is that the question?
Yeah, how do we even frame these are, if you know Pence, what would get him to go, or something?
I think if you wrote him a check, maybe. That's what it sounds like.
I think you catch their attention most profoundly with money. And when you look at, and Trump has skirted this issue, but occasionally he's talked about it. When you have, by some estimates, combining credit card, personal, and government debt of $50 trillion, you are on the precipice. You are getting ready to be pushed over. It could take a year, it could take 10 years, but you're in deep trouble. And the indicator on this, watch it closely, is going to be when the Chinese, the European Union, perhaps the Japanese, decide that, for example, Donald Trump is so untrustworthy that they make a run on the dollar. And we wind up with the dollar being replaced by perhaps a basket of currencies first as the transactional reserve currency in the world. Our inflation will go to 1,000% overnight because we will no longer be able to deal with our debt by printing money, because every dollar we print will cause inflation to skyrocket. That's what we've been doing. We have printed more money in the last 10 years than any other state entity in history. And that's in constant dollars. That takes into consideration every bankrupt empire in history. We have done something unprecedented because we had the military power to do it. When the world determines that it is ready to stand up to us, when it determines we're so irresponsible and reckless that it must stand up to us, it will do so. And we will be basket cases overnight, simply by the fact they take over the dollar. Watch it closely. Chinese have already got most of their transactions in Asia in renminbi. They've already replaced the dollar for most of their transactions, and that's where a lot of the world's transactions are taking place right now. We just made a huge mistake. We could have been a member of the Asia Development Bank, and we in a myth said, no, we're not going to join it. British weren't that stupid. Nobody else was that stupid. You don't want to stay out of a bank that whose ultimate purpose is to replace you.
I don't know how, what politicians will hear, but this is what I believe and hope for. We've mentioned Andrew Bacevich a couple times. In his book about the new American militarism, he describes one defining feature is the romanticization of the military. And we certainly see that in the culture, the glorification of the military ideal and the projected valorization on veterans. And so I believe that veterans have a powerful story to tell that can change the culture. And part of the adaptive change, the adaptive challenge, I think, is to move veterans' own self-understanding from patient and pathologized, disorder, maladjusted, that needs to be medicated, to profit. I think that the veterans who have actual experience of our wars and the costs of those wars can speak with great power to the political establishment that has sent them to these wars. I noticed whenever I submit letters on whitehouse.gov, if I mention in my letter that I'm a veteran, I always get an answer. If I don't mention that I'm a veteran, I usually don't get an answer. So I don't know if that's just a little measure, but I think that the veteran community has can discover its voice and needs to discover its voice, and that's why I've become a member of Veterans for Peace. I've started a chapter of Veterans for Peace. I believe that this kind of voice can influence the political leadership, and that they will listen.
Both Mr. Wilkerson and Mr. Palmer mentioned the military-industrial complex, and you've talked about the need for terminology, and so I just want to suggest something, a better term maybe, because that's hard for activists that are in the street. It's so hard to say military-industrial complex. It's like 10 syllables or something, so I found something that's about half that. And that is, to borrow a term from Greek mythology, which is the harpy, which is half human and half bird. And so these two entities that are together, just to abbreviate that, military does mean government, basically. It's under government control and is an arm of the government. And industrial, that's like corporations, business corporations. So we can shorten those to Govy, that's like harpy. Govy Corby Complex. And that, the Govy Corby Complex. Go, Govy Corby Complex. Get out of here. I mean, it's just easier and quicker, just a suggestion.
Hello, I'm wondering if you could comment on militarization and how that's moving to the local police forces. And that was a very big issue, obviously, with the in North Dakota with the water protectors and how the response was to that. And I was remembering back to 2008 when I wanted to go participate in a peaceful demonstration, and I was terrified by how there was sort of a joint command center set up at the time of the Republican convention in St. Paul, and people were wearing riot gear to just police the protesters. And anyway, I feel very fearful about that development, but I don't understand how far that's gone in terms of like either joint command. I'm just wondering if you can speak to that issue at all.
I sat on a group in Washington for a year with former directors of the FBI, FISA court judges, Federal District Court of Washington judge. Most of the group was lawyers who were interested in the Constitution. The name of the group is the Constitution Project. And you can Google it, and you can find our some 75-page report on the militarization of law enforcement in the United States of America. We started with Judge Webster, for example, former director of the FBI, giving us a presentation on the $5 billion in armaments that since 9/11 had been given by the Defense Department to law enforcement all across the country. And we made recommendations as to what should be gotten back immediately because it's far too heavy an armament. We made recommendations as to what ought to be looked at in that respect, and if the police force could give a justification for it, maybe. And the justification wouldn't be 235 no warrant, no knock SWAT team takedowns of homes in Chicago, for example, where incidentally they had killed innocent civilians and covered it up. In their apparatus, they had made restitution, but it never got to the papers, it never got anywhere. We had some 35 police chiefs from all across the country, Los Angeles, Houston, Denver, Dallas, Fort Worth, and so forth, come in and testify to us. You read that report and you'll see the recommendations that we made, and they were serious recommendations on how to curb this program. But one of the things that we discovered from the police chiefs in particular was that the concept that they thought was most important, and we were talking, Coleen and I were talking about this on the way over here. Community policing is the concept they call it. Making bonds between the community and the policemen and so forth was being utterly destroyed by this. And we talked about with them why. We got such things as on the police chief side. These guys love this stuff. They like to use it. They like to roll up in their MRAP, their $1 million mine-resistant vehicle. They like to roll up in their track vehicle with a 50 caliber machine gun on the top and so forth. Well, okay, we can do something about that. We'll quit giving it to them. They shouldn't have it. What should they have? We went through an entire list of equipment that the DOD was giving out to these law enforcement. We said this one no, this one yes, and so forth and so on. We listened to the police chiefs because we didn't want to take away a valid requirement that they might have. By and large, what we found, though, was that this program had begun to change the very culture of law enforcement. They began to think like military people. They began to think that their job was to kill people. Yes, that's the military's job, is to kill people. The law enforcement job is not to kill people, it's to protect people. And to kill someone only as a total last resort. So we were actually changing the culture of law enforcement all across America to, yeah, it's okay to kill people. And we did a lot of other things culturally that augmented that too. But I hope that the Congress looks at that report. We did it for them. We hope they listen to it and they stop some of the things they're doing that are making this worse and worse and worse. My son-in-law is a policeman in Montgomery County. He's been a policeman for 20 years. Montgomery County is the county just north of Washington, D.C. And he tells me that one of the problems they have in Montgomery County Police is former military coming in to be policemen. Now, veterans, you should give them jobs. We should look for some place for them to serve. But this is my son-in-law who is very pro-military. And he says, I'm not sure about this because it's really hard to change these guys' culture, in some cases women. It's really hard. They want to shoot first and ask questions last. He's got a partner right now who's missing his right leg below the knee. But he could pass the test for the Montgomery County Police, so he's Jim's partner right now. And Jim is constantly talking to John. This is a 20-year policeman who believes in his heart in community policing. He's constantly talking to John about no, this is the way you do it. This is the way you do it. And he lives in perpetual fear of something John has seen in Iraq triggering something in a way that's going to compromise him in a law enforcement situation. And he watches him closely. This detracts from his ability to do his job properly. So it's a mixed bag. We think we've done a good report, and we hope the Congress listens to it and takes the actions that it can take. More than that, we hope these police chiefs, whom we've had in on a regular basis, go back and take some of this back to their police forces. They understand the problem too. By the way, one of the biggest things they emphasized to us throughout these meetings was that the drug war is corrupting not only their police forces, but it's also corrupting the judges in the courtrooms. It's either corrupting them or driving them out of the service as a judge. Because the laws are so draconian and they're so fixed that when a judge has to keep telling somebody who comes before him, who probably ought to get a slap on the wrist and go back outside, 20 years, bang, 20 years, bang. How long are you going to be able to do that before you say, this isn't worth it, and you leave? So we're losing all these good judges at the 16, 17, 18-year point, and we're corrupting our police forces with all these perverse incentives that the stats you get that count, that get you promoted, that get you noticed, are all associated with the drug war. So don't go out and get a stat on robbery. Don't go out and get a stat on grand auto or whatever, or even murder. Go out and get your stat on the drug war, and you're going to go someplace. We heard that over and over and over again. You're ruining my police force. Now, we want to look back at them and say, you're ruining your police force. You're the one who goes along with this. But it takes courage even for a police chief to stand up to the culture and what it rewards you for. Now we're giving people who make a drug bust, if they make the drug bust and there's something in the house where we're giving them that. We're giving them boats. We're giving them automobiles. That's the law now. That you get a portion of whatever is hit when that guy gets hit, and if he goes to jail and so forth, you get some of the booty. By the way, Bradley Birkenfield, the guy that wrote Lucifer's Banker, the IRS gave him $104 million as his percentage of that deal, and then sent him to jail for 2 years.
Thank you so much. And there obviously are even now police departments who are resisting to go to North Dakota to fight the water protectors there. So I'm really glad that you brought up North Dakota, because we just had a journalist return from there, from Standing Rock, and they took a lot of video and wrote a lot of articles and pictures for us. And it's just an all-out war zone. And if it indicates anything, is that these police forces are not there to protect, like you said, protect us, we the people. They're there to protect the corporations and those oil pipelines, and they're there to work for the state in times when we resist to protect our own water. So thank you so much, both Reverend Antal and Lawrence Wilkerson. I believe we're out of time, so we're getting the nods.
I think so. I think we could stay and listen for a long time. It's been so instructive and informative, but we said we were going to be done half an hour ago, and you've been, people are so engaged. So it's been a real honor for us at First Unitarian Society to host this conversation. This is what we want to be about in the world. Being peacemakers and having the difficult conversations. But lest we end on a note of despair, I think it's important that we do go out with a note of hope. And these words of the poet Adrienne Rich have been living with me this week, so I'll share these with you as we go out. My heart is moved by all that I cannot save. So much has been destroyed. I have to cast my lot with those who, age after age, perversely, with no extraordinary power, reconstitute the world. Go in peace. Go in peace. Go in peace.